Nathan Buckley is the Australian Football Hall of Famer alongside of me. Bucks, good morning.
Morning, mate. I'm going to jump straight in. Buck stops. The first one I want to talk about is some games and some wins are worth more than just the 4 points, and that was exactly that for the Gold Coast Suns over Geelong yesterday. And the big Lukosius kicked 5 goals, so he stood up for them. But I was thinking, we didn't talk about it last week. I thought if the Suns lose again this weekend coming up against Geelong, and they haven't, what was it going to mean for two things: belief in the coach and retention of their young players? Because they go on this vicious cycle, the Suns. But in the end, they showed class, they showed speed, they showed want and intent that wasn't there the first 2 rounds. So now we have a look and we go, okay, well, Rao's just in and under and having a crack. Lukosius has kicked 5. Miller just runs everywhere. Weller is a player who is worth what they've spent on him and covers the ground really well. Holman's a tough player who is a bit of heart and soul in that front half and puts mass pressure on. They've got speed, Roses, Jeffries, Farrar, Ainsworth. So in the end, it was a great win for the Suns, equally as bad for Geelong. But if the result had been flipped, that's why it was such a good win for them. If the result had been flipped, they'd be the side without a win, and the scrutiny would be so much more intense and fierce than it's going to be on the Cats. So, and we will get to the Cats later in the morning. Second one for me is just give us a heads up. I don't often talk about officiating.
No, you don't.
I don't often talk about head office as such, but give us the heads up if there's a rule of the week or if there's a focus area.
Yep.
The coaches,
let us know,
and the players. No, not even media, but the coaches and the players need to know. And I don't know if a message went out, but if there's a rule of the week or if there's something that is being coached into the umpiring group, the clubs need to know that before, not after. I'd rather have the preamble rather than
is this
the
not
postscript.
an umpire just going rogue though? Because I don't think it was the rule of the week. I'm with you, and if there is going to be a rule of the week, we've seen it with holding the ball, we've seen it with insufficient intent. I reckon we've seen it with 15-metre kicks that have been called play on. They haven't gone far enough.
Right contest. It's not. I don't see it as a rule of the week, but you can understand that this is a cohort of an elite competition. They get coached as well. The umpires get coached as well. So it's important. Because we think when senior coaches coach their lists or their teams, we see slight changes in the way they go about it. Maybe more West Coast, more aggressive with hands and go forward last week, and it came through again this week. The umpires get coached as well. And if there are themes around something that they feel like they need to do better or something that they're missing or something they want to focus on, it won't be just 1 or 2. But I think that needs to be communicated because it's part of the way the game is going to be adjudicated.
But how can you have in one game a free kick from the top of the goal square, then a minute later McGovern does the same thing, and that's play on, or the same night in the same round, Jack Higgins is throwing his arms about, and one umpire says, "Okay, I'm not too fussed by that. I understand there's frustrations in football. He wasn't threatening. He didn't swear. He didn't point at me, so I'm going to let it go." The game was no better for that umpire paying that free kick. So so the free kick was about him and him injecting himself onto the game.
Potentially. And in context, like Harry Mackay was tackled. He looked like he might have dropped the ball at the start, but the free kick was probably, for me, was for a hold, which was to him 20 metres out from goal and 45-degree angle. Maybe it was a bit of a square up.
A payback.
Maybe it's a bit of that in the umpire's mind. We're human. But in the end, it wasn't a great look. But my main point is get the information to the clubs beforehand. Now,
should the AFL have clarified? So last week, as I said,
happened quickly.
The next morning, 9:30 Sunday morning, there was a statement from the AFL with the audio that they ticked off on the decision. Now, this happened Saturday. We're sitting here Monday morning, and there's been nothing from the AFL.
I expect that we'll hear something.
I would hope so.
Obviously, I reckon every show today we'll talk about it. The third one for me is Swans met their MCG Demons, and they weren't able to conquer them this time around either. John Longmire last week, and love him as a coach, and hit the nail on the head there. Contested ball -34, and still with that weight of possession against to Melbourne and that opportunity to tackle, still got out tackled by a couple. So we'll get to who does that say more about after 8, but the Swans weren't able to replicate the type of intensity and their DNA that actually around the ball and in the contest that gives them the chance to impose their game style on the opposition. Franklin came back into the side for McLean. The question still remains there is how do they do their tall forward setup?
Yes.
And where does Buddy fit in? And I mean, it's funny. He looked dangerous.
He looked their most dangerous, didn't he?
Correct.
Yesterday?
So
but it's the flow-on effect for everyone else.
But just because Buddy comes in and they lose a game of footy doesn't follow that they lost the game of footy because they got the selection wrong. But I think Buddy is still can have an impact in this competition. Can have an impact. It's not going to be as the player that he was 10 years ago, but he's still a force for them.
Just Melbourne. I mean, they're powerful. They're a powerful unit. They're the highest scoring team in the competition across 3 rounds. Now, if there was a question over Melbourne in the past, it's the connection between mids and forwards and
21-8.
And their ability to waste entries and things like that. They've worked hard on that. It appears there. I mean, we're going to talk about Collingwood a lot, but Melbourne are just sitting there nicely.
Yeah, they're travelling really good. But it does beg the question, what happened up in Brisbane last week? But, it's a hard competition. Number 4 for me is DNA Dogs. I spoke about Sydney's DNA not being executed, but it's a while back. But the Dogs win under that pressure, under that scrutiny, not unlike the Gold Coast Suns. They needed to get that done, and it was a great night for them. +18 contested ball, +5 clearance. But I think the questions were about the tall forwards. In the end, they still played tall. So Lobb came back into the side, and Lobb and Norton there with Ugle-Hagan, even though Darcy went out. Ugle-Hagan got a matchup with Joyce, who's just not ready to play that role, and that matchup was exposed. So this is the opportunity that you get if you play those talls. It's the one matchup that the defence can't quite get right on the third tall.
It's an excellent point because the same thing happened in the showdown. Sorry to disrupt the Bucks, but it's on the same point. Thilthorpe got a matchup that he would have loved. So it was Cleary, or it was someone that had 10 centimetres, who was 10 centimetres shorter than him. And then they flip it and they go, okay, well, Thilthorpe looks dangerous, so we'll go Aaliyah to Thilthorpe, but then Walker gets the matchup that he wants. Or then Jonas has gone to Rankine when Jonas would usually play tall, and he gets the matchup. So it is the flow-on effect, and it's the structure of the forward line, not just the one-on-one.
Yeah,
matchup.
So I think that worked. That's the first time we've seen it work. It's the first bit of evidence. And on Ugle-Hagan
They did only kick 10 goals, though.
Correct. Yeah, and Ugle-Hagan kicked 5 of them. And I want to focus on that just in terms of that game and that occasion. What an amazing and remarkable performance by the young man who had the week that he had, who stood up, kicked his first goal, pointed to his skin, stood up for his mob, his people, his race, and Artie Jones, who's a young bloke who was playing his first game, and the unbridled joy that he showed to get out on the field after, and the scenes in the broadcast afterwards. I thought that was just it was a confirming night for Jamara. It was a confirming night for a stance against racism, but it was a confirming night for the Western Bulldogs because they need that type of. It was a flag in the ground moment that they needed to, make something happen this year, and it needed to happen there. And you got a couple of young players, young Indigenous players, who in some ways have injected the want and the desire, and the energy back into a football club.
And then the Western Bulldogs put Jamara up with Luke Beveridge at the post-game media conference, and I watched every minute of it, and he was that impressive.
Yeah, he's a good kid.
So well done to Jamara, firstly, and how mature and the way that he's developing across his on-field play, but also off-field, and the Western Bulldogs for being prepared to put him up, and to Luke Beveridge as well. And just a word on Bontempelli. Yep. Sometimes captains just stand up. And it wasn't his biggest night in terms of numbers, but his actual influence on the game and the courage that he played with, and some of his defensive acts were enormous. So, and I thought Lockie New and Harris Andrews as captains as well. I thought it was a great night for the captains on Thursday. But well done, Bucks.
It's a way back, but yeah, I thought that the Dogs were great. The last one I've got is just a quick one. Is Izak Rankine, the new Eddie Betts. He just keeps standing up, and the Adelaide crowd love him. He's an excitement machine, isn't he? And I think that he'll just keep bringing people through the turnstiles. David King, our man, who is prone to some pretty big statements, said he's transformed this football club. And it stuck out for me, like right at the end of the game, this guy's changed the footy club. And I think that's a big call. I think it sort of happens more than that. But he's definitely going to be the embodiment of their character and the personification of the way that they go about it. I think Matty Nix and his coaching team have done really well. Their forward line has shifted enormously since round one. Rankine's been a consistent part of it. But he's kicked 8 goals in his first 3 games, and he's missed as many as he's kicked. But he's creating great opportunities. He's seizing moments, and he seems to be the type of character that wants and welcomes the expectation and pressure. And the real guns, the real match winners in the competition, that's a consistent part of who they are. So I couldn't be more impressed with the way that he started with that high expectation and pressure. He's been brilliant for Adelaide early in the season.
Now, after round 1, Bucks, I've had some comments which caught a few people off guard on the Sunday Footy Show at least. I thought, are they just, with the way that they played, a little bit comfortable? And is that why winning back-to-back premierships is so hard? And there were some edits that you looked at defensively that were really poor. Some of the way that they were really jovial and the way that they were carrying themselves, some of the comments that they've made throughout the pre-season. I thought, hang on, is this a team that is just a little bit satisfied? So Jeremy Cameron can probably get away with that.
Well, he's one of the few that can look his coach in the eye. If it wasn't for him, their last 2 losses in particular would be a lot worse.
So he's got the talent to do that and flick the switch. But if his teammates have also celebrated like that, I'll ask you the question, can Zach Tui get away with living off beer fumes and hash browns for breakfast? Can Tom Atkins do the same? Because he's not the same player that was jumping on landmines for his teammates in the last 10 games of last year. Can Zach Guthrie do it? Can Brian Myers do it? Can Brad Close do it? The answer, Tyson Stengel is a shadow of the All-Australian player that he was last year. Can he do it? This is a group that's satisfied.
There's little doubt about that, and Chris Scott couched it really well because he knows that the reactions, and he would see it as an overreaction, will come. But I don't think it will be an overreaction. It'll just be an analysis and a breakdown of what is actually taking place for them. And they're just not defending. Like they haven't, only one team has given up more scores on turnover than Geelong, and that's Hawthorn. And until the weekend when they beat North, we thought that they were very poor in their first 2 games. Geelong are last at clearances. They've won the least number of clearances in the competition, and we know that that's always been, the starting point of any contest. You go, okay, well, here we go. We're either in a centre bounce or we're at a throw in somewhere, and the ball either goes 25 to 50 metres your way or 25 to 50 metres the other, and Geelong aren't winning those situations. They aren't winning those contests. They're third last for disposal efficiency. And the other one that their short kicks are last, and whether that's a legitimate stat, but their effective kicks, they're last. And the one thing that is, you talk about their offense from last year, the one thing that really stands out is after round 10 last year, they were 18th for long kicks. So they were finding short targets. They were high in uncontested marks, but they still kept flow in their game. So it said to me that they were working really hard for the ball carrier to progress the ball forward to their dangerous forward line. In the first 3 rounds of this year, they're first for long kicks and last for short kicks. So they're going long to contests more often, and they're going to Tom Hawkins, who isn't ready. Jeremy Cameron is an up and about forward. He's not a destination for your long down the line as such. And they're missing that synergy that Chris Scott spoke about that is marginal whether you win or you lose, and it's a come to Jesus moment for them. They got to work out exactly where they're going to go from here, and they play Hawthorn. They've got a long break into Easter Monday, and they've got a chance to draw the line and start again.
Did we overestimate their recruits in the off season?
Their recruits were never for this year. Like Tanner Broom was going to give a little bit. Yep. He was going to add a little bit to the midfield mix. Bowes should be about giving, but then the pick 7 actually helps them in the long run. And Ollie Henry's going to get better in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think it's probably as much about how they look in the next 2 or 3 years as opposed to really wanting to go to the well again.
I'm just loving it. Some of the text messages we get here are very funny, and this is a good one. So this is a bit left of centre, but morning corn and bucket. I've been asked to do the running for a local B grade team. What makes a good AFL runner? Do you just deliver the message, or do you put some mayo on things? Thanks, says the bear. What makes a good AFL runner? And give me. Anyone listening, give me your running stories. Have you been on the end of a good spray from a runner? Have you been on the end of a runner that went rogue and delivered a different message to what the coach had?
How would you know?
Delivered?
You got no idea.
Well, the things come out after. Was it the runner that for the Pies that got in the wrong way in a big moment? So there's some.
Don't bring
and that
up.
was a bad. That's not a great example.
No, but Alex Wood was a ripper.
I know. He did it tough, didn't he?
How was David Arnfield as a runner?
The best.
Why?
Because he was an extra player. He was able to get, and you could probably get away with a few things. My brother's got some good run. He was warned by the AFL so many times to the point where he had to hang up the green running vest because he just got too involved.
I reckon the key attribute of a good runner is to know when to filter and when not to filter. So they have to have a really strong connection with the playing group. They need to be validated by the playing group. So the playing group need to believe in them and respect them, absolutely. And they need to and that runner needs to know a little bit about the psychology and know the players that well, sometimes even just as much as the coaches, because when a message is delivered, sometimes from the senior coach in the moment, the runner's got 10 or 15 seconds to work out how he's going to get that across directly, even if told, say this word for word. And so they play a really important role. You've got your work cut out for you. You
got your work cut out for you, Bear.
I think Darcy Cameron's been great. There's no doubt that Ash Johnson coming in helps, and that was an amazing return,
wasn't it?
And Collingwood people would have loved that. Probably now asking the question, well, where was he for the first couple of weeks? Yeah. Well, the side's performing really well, and it's great to see him rewarded for his work, and will be really important now to do some of that ruck work. Maybe Dan McStay.
I can't wait to see what they come up with because there's no obvious answer, and it won't just be one person. They'll have to rely on a number of players to cover the load. We're doing this every Monday where we pose the question: what does the result, or who does the result say more about which club? I'm going to start with Thursday night. The Western Bulldogs beat Brisbane by 14 points. Who does it say more about, the Dogs or Brisbane?
I reckon it says more about the Dogs. I think it was a great effort for them to be able to respond to the first 2 weeks, and they definitely needed to. So it says that there's a little bit of fight in them yet. Who does the result say more about, Collingwood or Richmond?
Richmond, because we know everything we need to know about Collingwood. Are Richmond top 4 worthy? Probably not. Are they a bit sluggish through the midfield? Are they a bit slow? Probably. And do they have the upcoming talent under the age of 24 that some of the other teams do? And I'll probably say no. So I think the result says more about the Tigers as you raise your eyebrows at my answer to that question. Hawthorn beat North Melbourne by 19. Who does it say more about?
North Melbourne for me. They did really well in the first 2 weeks, winning both games by less than a goal. We shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves. Clarko is a great coach. There will be changes, but it's going to take time for North Melbourne to put this squad together, and they're going to have some performances where they lower their colours. That's a simple fact of the matter. The Giants and Carlton.
Carlton, but not for the reasons you think. So they're undefeated, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced about what I've seen from the Blues. The tools in their side aren't impacting as you would have hoped. And so when you look at De Koning, Pitnet, Curnow tick, but Mackay's going just ordinary, and Silvani, and their inefficiency going forward. At one point in the second half, they had 30-something inside 50s for 3 goals. So still a work in progress for Michael Voss and his undefeated Blues. St Kilda knocked off Essendon by 18. Who does the result say more about?
I think St Kilda. I think the bona fides of their defensive strategies are strong, and we should have expected that with Ross Lyon. They're only scoring at 37% of inside 50s, which ranks them 18th in the competition for going inside and then turning those into scores. But that doesn't seem to matter because they putting the ball forward means that they can defend all of that ground, and they're defending it as well as any team in the competition. So I think it says a fair bit about the Saints and how they can defend, because the Bombers kicked 100 points in the first 2 rounds. Got a couple of goals in junk time this week, but largely, kept them to a much lower score. In the showdown, Port Adelaide and Adelaide, who to say more about?
This is the hardest one for me. I could answer it either way. I'm going to choose to go that it says more about Adelaide and the fact that they are they're in finals contention. And I believed that before the start of the year, and I still believe that despite starting the season 0-2. They now have a lot of talent in the forward end of the ground. They've got depth that they perhaps haven't had, and we've seen that with Himmelberg going out of the side, but they're just hard to play against. So when you turn up and play Adelaide, if you win, you're going to really deserve the win. So I think that result was significant for Matthew Nicks, who needed the win. We've spoken a bit about this game with Stewie Dew. The Suns beat Geelong. Who does that say more about?
I think it's Geelong. Yeah. It just says that they're just not where they want to be. It's not where they need to be. And there's a big gap between how they finished off last year and how they've started off this year. I think the Suns' pace worried them.
Definitely.
But the game, Geelong have been in all of their games in the last quarter, and they've been overrun. They were overrun in the Collingwood game. They were overrun in this game. The Carlton game, they had chances but couldn't quite get it over the line. But they've been in contests, but that's not what you expect from a reigning premier, just to be in contests. They've got a fair bit of work to do.
Their lowest score that they kicked last year was 66 points. So that puts it into context.
Yeah. So they're a long way off, and they're the only team that hasn't got a win so far this year. Melbourne and Sydney on the MCG.
Probably Melbourne. The fact that they're a real premiership shot, highest scoring team in the competition across 3 rounds. Their forward line connection looks good. Multiple options to goal. Oliver kicks his 2, Hunter kicks 2, Van Rooyen kicks his 2, Fritsch is back into the side, gets 3, Chandler bobs up with 3, Spargo kicks 2. Like multiple goal scorers everywhere in their running and scoring power, and a significant day. And Anna touched on it in the news for Brodie Grundy. The way that he covered the ground yesterday, the spread from stoppage is what we've wanted to see from Grundy. So Gawn going down, what a recruit that is going to turn out to be. And I think an upgrade on Luke Jackson. So for me, it was Melbourne. And finally, it was the Derby out west. Fremantle got it done by 41 points. Who does it say more about?
Yeah, I'll go to Freo, and that is with backs against the wall. They were able to find something. They had some competitive advantages in so far as the opposition lost players to injury and were down and undermanned as the game wore on. But at Fremantle, they showed a little bit more dare in their offence, and I've got no doubt that they've been coached to be, not to be as dour as they were in the first 2 weeks. And but the players needed some validation of, okay, when we move the ball and shift the ball here, that we can get through. I don't know about West Coast defensive structures from a team defence and where that ranks in the competition. I wouldn't have it in the top half at this stage. But, Freo, it was somewhat of an easy kill, but they did what they had to do, and they've shown that there'll be a little bit of validation for them.
Good to see Fremantle kick over 100 points.
Yeah.
That was a win for them. It was a shootout early. 5 goals each in the first quarter. Of course, the fallout will be about West Coast and the injuries. Absolute carnage